Now that our development environment is ready, we can start creating our website. But before we start creating anything, I would like to make a little introduction to HTML. Because even though this class is mostly practical, it's a hands-on class where we are going to learn by doing, there are some things we need to know. Knowledge is important. Because remember, we want to learn to build a website, not just build one. This is going to be the dynamics of the class. I'm going to make first a little theoretical intro of the concepts we are going to see, and then we will apply them into our website to see them in action. Let's start with our introduction to HTML. In that video, we are going to create our first HTML file. We will also see how to use Emmet, that is a very useful tool to write faster HTML, and we will also learn the basics of the syntax of HTML. Web pages are essentially a collection of HTML elements, such as div, h1, p, image, whose functionality is to give structure to the web pages. Those elements are the building blocks of a website. Then we can add style with CSS or functionality with JavaScript or server-side languages. But keep this in mind, without HTML, there are no websites. This is an HTML element. An HTML element has an opening tag, which is that part here, and a closing tag, and its content in between. An HTML element can have attributes, one or more. Attributes add additional information to the HTML element. Attributes have a name, href in that case, and a value. This specific HTML element, which has the A tag, is a link and has an attribute, href, which sets the page where the link points to. Here I'm placing the attribute value within quotes, but since HTML5, this is not mandatory anymore, so feel free to do not use the quotes if you prefer so. Some HTML elements have no content and no closing tags. They are called empty elements. Empty elements can have a trailing slash, but this is optional in HTML5. The structure of HTML is always a set of nested elements. One element contains other elements that contains other elements, and so on. Here we have a body tag that contains a h1 element and a div element. That div element contains a p element and a image element. Don't worry too much now about the meaning of those HTML elements. Just if you are curious, h1 is for headings, div is like a box containing other elements, and p is for paragraphs, and img for images. That collection of HTML elements organized hierarchically is what we call the DOM, the Document Object Model. And it can be represented as a tree. The elements that are at the same level, like h1 and div in that case, are siblings. Then the elements that are above others are the ancestors of parents of the ones below them. In that case, div is the parent of p and image. And the ones below are the descendants of children. In that case, h1 is a descendant of body. Now we are ready to create our first HTML page. So let's open Visual Studio Code and get started. Here we are. My project is already opened. If yours is not, you have to open it. There are different things you can do for that. The first one is to go to File, Add Folder to Workspace, select the folder of your project and add it. I'm going to cancel because I don't want to add it, but you see the point. Another way of doing that is opening the Finder or the File Explorer in Windows and just drag the folder you want to add. I'm going to remove it now because I don't want it here. I do it by selecting Remove Folder from Workspace. Keep in mind that this only removes the folder from the workspace. It is not deleted from your computer. Here we can see all the files we need to build our website. The one we are going to work with now is index.html. If you have some text here, just delete it. This index.html is the home page of our website. The main page, the page we are going to see when we type our domain name in the browser. If we go to nasa.gov, what we see here is their main page, their index.html. If we navigate to other pages, what we see here is a reference to other files in the website. Back to our HTML file, let's start creating some code here. The first thing we want to do is to create the basic structure of the HTML file. We can do it manually, but I'm going to show you a faster way of doing it. Just type HTML:5. And voila, our HTML code has been created for us. What we have done here is using an emmet command. HTML:5 is an emmet command. Emmet is an extension for Visual Studio Code and other code editors, and what it does is generate HTML code for us, which is very useful. So what we have here is the basic structure of an HTML file. The first thing you see is the doc type declaration. This is just something that tells the browser that what we are writing here is HTML. Okay, in that case, it's HTML5. Then we have the HTML tag, or the HTML element, that wraps the rest of the HTML elements in our page. Inside the HTML element, we have the head element and the body element. Can you see that little minus sign here? It appears when you put the cursor on top of the line number, and you can use it to hide or show what an element contains. It is a good practice to add the lang attribute to the HTML element. Here we tell the browser in which language the text that element contains is written. This information has nothing to do with encoding of the page, which is set in the charset meta tag. The lang attribute provides helpful information to improve the user experience. That information can be used, for example, by text readers or by external spell checkers or even some translation scripts. Not adding the lang attribute will not affect the rendering of the page. Your page will be shown correctly, but remember that it's a good practice to use it, so please remember to add it to the HTML element. The lang attribute can be added to any other HTML element, not only to the HTML element. So for example, here I can add it to a div tag. In that case, I'm telling that the content of that div tag is going to be in Spanish. The head section contains information that is not rendered by the browser and is not shown in our page, but it's very important. The most important pieces of that head element are the title. The title is what is going to appear in the browser tab. Let me show you. Let's open the terminal, and from here we want to open that file in the browser. So type open and the name of the file. Make sure you are in your project folder. You are in the directory where that file is. Here we can see our HTML file open in the browser, and here in the browser tab we can see the title. This title is also what Google shows in the search results page. You can see it here. This will be the title of that page. The title is also one of the most important factors that Google takes into account in order to rank the pages in the search results. So if you are concerned about SEO, the title is something you have to pay attention to. Besides the title, there are other important elements in the head section. Some of them are the meta tags. The meta tags add additional information about the document. There are several meta tags you can use. Let's see here only the most important ones. One of them is the charset. That one is used to tell the browser which character encoding needs to be used to render the characters of the page correctly. So that in languages like Spanish, the accents are going to be shown correctly. Otherwise, if we don't use the correct character encoding, those accents are going to be shown like weird characters, and we don't want that. You can use the charset UTF-8, and most European languages are going to be shown correctly. Another very important meta tag is the viewport. The viewport meta tag tells the browser how to control the visible area of the web page. This is very important for responsive design. I'm not going to get into details here, just make sure you include that meta tag if you want your page to be responsive. Of course, this is not enough to make your page responsive. We will see how to do that with CSS later on this class. But always make sure you include the viewport meta tag in order to make the responsive CSS work. XUA compatible meta tag is used to ensure a better compatibility with older versions of Internet Explorer. Don't worry too much about that meta tag. Leave it there as it is, and this is it. Then we have the description meta tag. This meta tag has no importance when rendering the pages, but it's a good idea to use it because Google will use the content we put in that meta tag to show the description text in the search results pages. You can think of it more like a marketing tool. That's something that affects how your page will look. Another frequently used meta tag is the keywords meta tag. I personally don't use it because it was created to help your page rank on the search results by allowing you to set a set of keywords that you want your page to rank for, but this seems to have no effect on SEO anymore, so I don't see the point of using it. Let me change the title of that page. I'm going to call it My Web as my project. And let's see a couple more things we can do in the head section of the HTML page. In the head, you can also put the reference to external CSS and JavaScript files. This is a comment. This is how you write an HTML comment. Anything you write here inside the comment is going to be ignored by the browser. So it is just something you write for yourself to clarify your code or to help you remember something, whatever you want, but the browser will ignore that. So now we are going to make a reference to our JavaScript file and our CSS file so that we can use the code that we write in those files inside this HTML file. This is the code to link to an external CSS file. In that case, what we are doing here is telling the browser he can use this style CSS file we have here. In the href attribute, we put the path to the file, to the CSS file. In that case, the path is just the name of the file because the file is in the same folder than the HTML file. If it was inside a folder, for example, a CSS folder, we will have to add the name of that folder. Okay? Let me remove the reference to the CSS folder because we don't need it. And let's do the same thing with the JavaScript file. The code is that one. As you can see, it is a little different. Instead of using the link tag, we use the script tag. And this script tag has a closing tag. And the path to the file is in a source attribute instead of an href. Besides adding a reference to external CSS and JavaScript files, we can place code here. We can place JavaScript code and CSS code in the head section. To write JavaScript code, we use the script tag, the same one we use for the reference to the external file, but without the source attribute. And here we can type any JavaScript code we want. This is a comment in JavaScript. As you can see, it is different from the comment in HTML. Actually, if I try to add an HTML comment here, it's not going to be recognized by the browser because anything that is inside those tags should be JavaScript code, and an HTML comment is HTML, not JavaScript. To add CSS code, we use the style tags, and again, everything that is inside those tags should be CSS. Comments and CSS are also the ones with the slash and the star. So if we try to write an HTML comment here, it's not going to work either. And this is it for the head section. Below the head section is the body, and here is where we place the HTML elements that are going to render our page. The elements that create something that we can actually see in the browser. For example, we can create a p element. A p element is an element that renders a paragraph. Now, if we open that HTML file in the browser, by writing open and the name of the file in the terminal, we can see that our p element has been rendered in the browser. And this is it for today. In the next video, we are going to start adding HTML elements to the body of our document so that we can start creating our web page.